Hello everyone, welcome to my weekly demo. I hope you are all doing well, staying safe, staying healthy, and also enjoying the lovely early summer, late spring weather. Today I am going to demonstrate how to make a beaded bubble wand. It's a fun thing to use because I mean, who doesn't love blowing bubbles? I've always liked doing it, and it's a lot of fun. But here you can make a really blinged up fancy bubble wand that's fine for anyone to use. So the first thing you will need is wire, and this is 18 gauge wire. You can find this in pretty much all the other supplies that I have at any craft store, Michael's, or any local craft store, or online. So you'll need a 18 gauge wire. You'll need a ruler or a tape measure, or both. You will need round nose pliers, and I have two different sizes here. You'll need cutters so you can cut your wire. Chain nose or flat nose pliers. And then also you'll need, you don't have to use these, but I love these. These are my nylon wire jaw straighteners, which I love using. And of course you'll need beads. So the beads you're going to need will need to be thick enough to go through the wire here. So large hole beads like these definitely will work. And then some smaller beads too, as long as the beads are the holes are big enough to go through the wire. And a lot of it is also trial and error. If you don't have large hole beads like this, it's just trial and error to try using other beads that you have. And you can use any beads at all that you want. So the first thing you're going to need to do is cut your wire, and you need 16 inches. That's why I really like using my tape measure. It's just easier to measure. So you cut 16 inches worth. And you can see my wire is just really kind of, it's not straight. And that's because it was unwound from the spool that was on. So that's one thing I really love to use about these nylon jaw pliers, because if you've seen some of my other demos, you'll see that I've talked about these before. They're great for straightening things out, straightening your wire out really quickly. So I'm going to show you. Just putting the pliers, just grabbing it like that, and then I'm just going to pull it onto the wire and just run it through, and it's going to straighten the wire. And it just makes it easier to work with. Depending on the gauge of the wire, sometimes you may need to do this more than once. This wire is thicker than some of the others I've used with recently, so I have to usually do this a couple extra times just so it gets nice and straight and makes the wire easier to work with. So now I've got the wire relatively straight. So the other thing you're going to need, I did not mention, you're going to need something round. You can use like a jar. I like using, I have a ring mandrel, and I'm not making a ring, but I can use this because it has different sizes, anything that's graduated. You can even use your wire spool if you want. But you need something round. You can use like a neck of a bottle. You can use a jar like this to wrap around the top. Really anything that's round. So what you're going to do now is going to wrap one end around a larger top here of the wire. What I'm going to do is I'll show you going to wrap this here, and you're going to leave a bit of a tail here because you're going to wrap this around the loop. Actually, I'm going to put it up in the bigger end here so you can see it's a more, okay. So you can see I've got that wrapped around the top. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tail here and I'm going to wrap it around the loop. And I find it's easier to take it off the round part to wrap it. And you can wrap it with your hands like I'm doing with your fingers, or you can use your pliers, your round nose pliers, and hold on to it with your hand and use your pliers to wrap it. And sometimes it's easier with this wire because it's thicker. Hi Shelly, hope you're having a great day. And if any of you have any questions, feel free to shout out. I will see your typing in real time here. So now what I'm doing is I'm wrapping the loop, the end here around the loop, just to so it's pretty round, not exact. So the great thing about this is you can kind of play with a little bit, so, and it to round it up a bit, and it doesn't have to be exact. So I've got a little bit of extra wire here. I'm going to just snip that off. Now, often when I'm working with wire, when you snip off the end, you often have like a little bit of a bit sticking out here. So what I do is I use my flat nose pliers and I just squish it onto here, and that will keep it so you're not getting scratched by any loose wire. And one thing I should mention too, the thicker the gauge wire, of course, the harder it is to work with. Okay. All right, so now I've got that all set. It's not sticking out. So now comes the fun part. Now you can put beads on. So you want to put about 2 to 3 inches or so, depending on how big you want your wand. If you decide you want your wand to be much longer, then you could cut more wire and put more beads on here. But you want to make sure that you leave enough room on the end that you're going to be able to wrap to make the other loop. And most bubble wands that I've seen too have like 2 different sizes of places to blow your bubbles out of. Usually have a bigger size and then a smaller size. So the other one other side, once we're done beading, is going to have the smaller wrap. Okay, so now I'm going to start putting beads on. And I just went through my stash and I have like all sorts of miscellaneous beads. So I'm making this more dressed up. This is actually it's all like black. But it's kind of fun to like mix things up a bit. How's that? That's kind of flashy. So I'm going to put on about, like I said, about 2 to 3 inches of beads. And, oh, hi Marcy, I'm glad you love seeing me. Thank you. So I'm going to, you can see I'm about 2 to 3 inches worth. And I'm just playing around with beads here to see what will fit and what won't. I did not set these up ahead of time. And it's kind of fun to play around. And it's a great way also if you have like all sorts of assorted beads. It's a great way of using up your stash. And I definitely have a sizable stash. So what I can do now, I'll go and take my ruler and just measure to see and I'm only measuring the number of beads I put on here. So I've got about 1 3/4 inches or so. So I'm going to keep going for a while. And again, you can make these in any colors, styles. It's just a lot of fun. Is that pretty? Fancy, huh? That's the fanciest bead wand you've ever seen. So, I mean, I've made these, and you can use these with any kind of wire, but really because these are bubble wands, you don't want to use like the real fancy wire. You want to use craft wire, which is what this is. Is that looking pretty? So again, I'm going to measure now and see. So I have about 2 3/4. I'm going to put a little more on here. And it doesn't have to be exact as far as how long you make them. You know, you can, doesn't have to be exactly 2.5 to 3 inches. I'm going to put a big bead on here because I just think, look at that. The bling is just awesome. Who doesn't like bling? Even on your bead wand. Just need one more bead on here. Again, I'm going to measure it. Yeah, so mine's winding up being, I've put on about 3.5 inches of beads, and that's fine. That is fine. So that's what I've put on there now. So now you're going to take your round object again, but you want a, Marcia, you like bling? I like bling too. Who doesn't like bling? I mean, really. So now I had used a larger sized round piece. I used my ring mandrel. I used like the very end here because it's the largest. But now I'm going to wrap again, but I want the wrap to be smaller than this. Again, remember how you have with your bubble wands, usually you have one size that's bigger, one end that's smaller. So now I'm going to do the smaller end. And again, I'm going to take my ring mandrel because I can use all sorts of different sizes. It's nice and round. But again, you could use your wire spool. You could use a bottleneck. You could use jars. Anything that you have at home will work. That's just round. And I bet if you want to make one of these and walked around your house, you could probably find more round objects that you would never have thought of using for a craft. So it's kind of a fun thing to do. So, okay, again, I'm going to wrap this around, and I'm going to do on a smaller, I'm going to do much smaller just so you can really see the difference. Again, what I'm going to do is wrap this with my hand just to make a loop. I'm going to take it off my mandrel. And I'm going to, you can see how much smaller that is from the other side. And I'm going to hold the loop here with my left hand, and my right hand, I'm a righty. And I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and again, I'm going to wrap this wire around, about 2 or 3 times. Possibly a little more, depending on, you want it to be nice and tight. You can see how I'm doing those wraps there. And because I had the wire up a bit here and the beads a little further down, I'm going to actually wrap this wire so it gets close to the bottom of, or the top of the beads, depending on which way you look at it, just to keep the beads so they're not sliding back and forth so much. And again, this is not really an exact science. just kind of have to eyeball it. Okay. So you see how I have that wrap there, and it's holding the beads there in place. So now I'm going to cut this end off. And again, I love these cutters because you can see they're really fine pointed, so you can get in really close. And I have a little bit sticking out here, so I'm going to use my flat nose pliers to squeeze the that wire that's sticking out in. Sometimes it can be a little fidgety, like this one is doing, especially at the end because everything is all wire wrapped. Sometimes it takes a little bit of maneuvering just to get it so the wire does what you want it to. Actually, I'm going to try and trim this off a little bit more. I'm going to flatten this a little more in here, and then I'll show you. I'm going to shape the wand a bit. Okay, so now I've got the wrap all in here. There's no scratchy, nothing sticking out. You can see this isn't exactly straight because I was holding it while I was working on getting the wire set. So luckily this wire is very forgiving. So I'm just straightening it a bit with my hand. And then sometimes the loops here can be a little wonky just after you've wrapped them. So you can move them, you can bend them a little bit so it straightens out. Voila! Beaded bubble wand. So ready for using. You can go outside, blow some bubbles, and it's also blingy too, so it's fancy. One thing also to use, remember when you're using any beads here, just make sure you're, because this may get wet. So you want to use beads that, are going to be safe to use. So the beads I use are usually glass, or you can use plastic too, but you just want to be careful. The beads that you use are not going to run in color if they get wet. Not that it's a big deal, but just so you don't get a bad surprise. So these are all pretty much color fast, and they're glass. And there you go. Beaded bubble wand. So now you can go outside and blow some bubbles with them. So let me know if you try one of these. It's a lot of fun to do. I hope you enjoyed my demo, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. I will see you next week. Stay safe, stay healthy. I will save this demo on my Facebook page, and it will go onto my YouTube page as well. Have a great week. Bye.